So TikTok and how short video formats ruin our attention span and ability to focus is becoming more apparent since new generations are being raised into this new technological environment. People of the previous generation, whose central nervous system was formed in the absence of short video formats, are somewhat immune to the injury of TikTok and shorts, and hence tend to be blind to its long-lasting effects. Although parents are whining about how their children are no longer interested in reading books and doing their homework, they still do nothing to prevent them from damaging their plastic brains. Canadian media theorist Marshall McLuhan is famous for saying that medium is the message. The crux of this idea is that the effect of form and the means of consumption is independent of its content. It's like tap water being more okay to drink than the water that comes from the toilet, although the content of those two being the same. Now, in this crisis of cognitive deficit, self-help and self-improvement protocols are becoming more popular. However, a lot of existing products and what they promise aren't substantiated by scientific studies. As I'm myself suffering from ADHD, I have tried out numerous supplements but to no avail. The sponsor of this video, Magic Mind, has sent me their nootropic drinks. Now, I don't want to give you a false promise about how this nootropic drink is going to change your life altogether. So I want to quickly tell you about my experience with it. Magic Mind is a productivity shot that combines nootropics, adaptogens, vitamins, and matcha, giving you a sustained smooth mental energy and workflow. What sets Magic Mind apart from other nootropics and stimulants is its ability to promote a sense of calmness and tranquility, all while helping you maintain focus and concentration on your tasks. And that's where the magic lies. Firstly, you have the option to take Magic Mind with coffee or without coffee. Now, I personally found the coffee option to be better, as it basically cancels out the jitters and excessive stimulation from caffeine and gives you this smooth workflow that you need to be productive. Now, the best part about the Magic Mind is that it doesn't leave you with this sort of crash that accompanies most stimulants like caffeine. Now, caffeine generally blocks your adenosine receptors, which are responsible for signaling tiredness. Magic Mind takes a different approach by preventing complete receptor blocking, so you can avoid the subsequent crash associated with adenosine signaling when the receptors are unblocked. Now, from my experience with Magic Mind, the best part about it is that it puts you into this Goldilocks zone between excessive stimulation and tranquility, which is basically what you would aim for when trying to be productive and concentrated on your tasks. Use the code TPD to get up to 56% off Magic Mind. You can find the link in the description. Now, getting back to Marshall McLuhan, he basically wanted to uncover how certain forms of media affected our psyche and by extension society. He would be interested in how TV as such, with its pulsing, radiating screen, grainy image, and ability to gather people around it, could influence the human psyche, as opposed to the effect of a specific program that people were watching at a given moment. According to McLuhan, radio, for example, independent of its content, activated shamanistic tribalistic instincts in virtue of affecting ear, thus retrieving this tribal, old, shamanistic, ritual-like behavior, which he thinks was one of the major reasons why Hitler rose to power. The message of radio, that is, its effect, was access to entire planet. Whereas TV, on the other hand, by virtue of being a participatory medium, whereby you had to fill in the gaps of a low-definition, grainy image, produced a sort of dialogue and in-depth participation. Something like a tactile relationship. And that's why McLuhan thinks that TV produced this society of beatniks and hippies with their emphasis on self-exploration and then, exploring nature and accentuating these interpersonal relationships. Today, I will treat TikTok as a medium and try to find out its message and effect on human psyche and society, beyond the devastating effect that it has on our higher cognitive faculties. Now, Marshall McLuhan maintained that any medium is an extension of our body. So, for example, mechanical technology is an extension of our musculature. Housing system is an extension of our immune system, whereas the electronic technology is an extension of our central nervous system. When organs are extended in such a way, brains numb it and amputate it so that it can relieve itself from the excessive stimulation from environment. But now the question is, what does specifically TikTok extend and hence what does it numb? Now, legs are numbed when they're extended into wheels. Your musculature, on the other hand, is numbed when mechanical technology substitutes manual labor. And social brain then gets amputated when it is extended into a social media. And here we approach the question of the video. What is specifically amputated when you are extended into an unending doom scrolling and consumption of short videos? Now, it's worth noting that new media invasion doesn't just amplify the pre-existing technologies, but rather introduces a completely new paradigm and hence brings forth completely new types of people. So, for example, motor cars were not just horseless carriages, or radio a wireless telegraph, but rather a completely new ways of communication that completely altered Western society, its infrastructure, its viewpoint, its culture, economy, and politics. As McLuhan points out, a new medium is never an addition to an old one, nor does it leave the old in peace. It never ceases to oppress the older media until it finds new shapes and positions for them. Hence, TikTok and short video formats aren't just regular videos that are short, but rather they constitute a completely new way of producing content. Keep in mind that every new medium obsolesces the one that preceded it. The same way, let's say, TV obsolesced radios and motor cars obsolesced horses. Now, when a new technology is created, it starts to affect you in a way that you become what you create and what you consume. What I'm trying to say is that the TikTok and short video formats are setting up a new standard that the old format videos are now have to comply to. The short format videos now introduced a standard that retroactively changed the old form of video producing. So, for example, if you take a look at some of the famous and let's say successful YouTube channels like Jesse James West or Chat, what you're going to see is that new successful long format videos are just shorts stitched together. These are videos composed of successive short, bursting, highly edited out segments which attempted holding onto their audience without losing pace and energy. So consequently, long format videos and new movies have to adapt to the standard of shorts. The point here is that a person of shorts no longer has the willingness or ability to sit through a relatively less volatile, long-winded material. The moment a video drops its intensity, there is a high chance that a viewer will browse away. The reason is that shorts have set up a standard whereby you shouldn't stress an iota of your central nervous system when consuming an internet product. TikTok, as I will argue, is an extension of our disinhibitory part of our central nervous system. The prefrontal cortex has the function of inhibiting our impulses and instinctive behavior. Now, the way it does this is by self-regulating and silencing the part of our brain that is responsible for producing the sensation of pleasure and reward. Thanks to our prefrontal cortex, we are able to consistently stick to our responsibilities and pursue our goals. This inhibition then is a process whereby you are inhibiting the very center and the very faculty that is in turn responsible for inhibiting your instinctive behavior, and hence the word disinhibition. It's like breaking the brake of your car so that you cannot stop it whenever it is necessary. Now, in my opinion, the message of TikTok can be encapsulated in the following principle, the principle of cognitive catering. TikTok makes you believe that all it takes for you to be entertained is just one swipe. You just click on an icon, and as if the whole world is at your disposal so that it can somehow please you and entertain you. It's like a decentralized monarchy where every single person with a smartphone becomes a king and owns a private jester. It's as if the whole world is competing with each other so that it can somehow entertain you. And what's most fascinating about it is that it sets up a standard whereby the only thing that can ever stimulate or entertain you is something that is very short, easily digestible, bursting, and excessively temperamental, which then can be only matched by itself. So basically it produces a virus, and the only antidote that you can get is offered by it again. Such standard then will completely obsolesce classical films and novels and the culture of book reading. If we take a look at new movies such as, let's say, Fast and Furious, what we're going to see is that Their overly used CGI is somehow desperate to compete with the culture of TikTok because, a modern blockbuster can never compete with a short video format if it is not going to be adapted on the very idea of this excessive stimulation. In the past, when brains were adapted to reading novels and watching classical films, you had to basically follow a narrative and wait for a culminative point to unfold. Now, the new type of content is a form of resonant, short bursting pulses, which just tries to keep you stimulated. Now, here's a quick breakdown of how TikTok transforms your brain into a useless piece of blob. The prime target of short videos is your mesocortical pathway, which extends from archaic part of your brain up to the prefrontal cortex, which is a brain region that is still evolving. The best encapsulation of prefrontal cortex's function is the following. It makes you do the harder thing when it is the right thing to do. In other words, you need it. Frequent consumption of shorts then makes your rational part of the brain obsolete. Doing the harder thing when it is the right thing to do is no longer necessary when you are just sitting on your couch and doom scrolling. One neuroscientific study demonstrated that the effect of TikTok and short video formats has to do with how it affects your dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. And basically what it does is that it inhibits it. And dorsolateral prefrontal cortex is basically the most rational part of your brain. So hence the disinhibiting effect of it. In short, the action of TikTok can be encapsulated in the concept of positive feedback loop. First, it offers you a content that is at the same time excessively stimulating, but doesn't require any form of mental energy or your higher cognitive faculties. After you have already adapted your dopamine system to such content, the only thing that can provide pleasure or reward is the very thing that provoked it in the first place. In other words, the more your prefrontal cortex is fried and exhausted, the more susceptible you get to short-term rewards. So TikTok and short format videos has to be considered as a new form of technology, like TV and radio, because its cultural impact will be more than equal than it was in the case of TV and radio and internet. It will be one of the most important contributing force in the bestialization of a current society. Now, the system that TikTok offers is basically impeccable in its ability to damage your brakes. Now, one important aspect about TikTok that completely differentiates it from other media, like comic books, TV, and radio, is that it creates a vicious circle that is unique to it. So, for example, comic books in the past, although they were more loaded with pictures than with words, they could act as a bridge for children so that they could basically jump from comic books to novels and reading. So basically, comic books were this transitory period for children, from easygoing material up to the, classical novels and so on and so forth. But TikTok and short video formats can never act as a bridge to anything good or, anything productive. It basically creates a vicious circle that, prevents you from escaping it forever. As there is no other type of content that can basically offer you the same intensity of stimulation that is available on TikTok and short format videos. Now, one important effect of doom scrolling is artificially induced self-forgetfulness. You see, most people binge watch TikTok so that they don't have to think about their responsibilities. TikTok somehow acts as a preventive mechanism by which you ignore and block out negative thoughts and ideas so that you don't have to face them. Not surprisingly, one study showed that TikTok and short video formats specifically activated the part of our brain which is termed default mode network. Now, default mode network is a hub of interconnected brain regions responsible for generating the sense of self and self-referential autobiographical thinking. The study pinpointed that TikTok specifically activates the subpart of default mode network that is responsible for perceiving your present situation and your present mental state. In contrast, the subsystem responsible for future planning and goal-directed behavior was silenced. And this asymmetry present in default mode network when consuming TikTok is something that resembles the state of ADHD and executive dysfunction, and also the maladaptive daydreaming disorder. Those are types of disorder that make you unproductive and keep you from entering into a concentrated mode of, undertaking your tasks. No wonder why Wikipedia article about maladaptive daydreaming disorder includes the trend that was popular on TikTok, which has to do with this rumination and then living in the fantasy world. Well, basically say bye to your focus and ability to do work. The overconsumption of shorts and TikTok somewhat resembles the effect of pornography or how it influences your brain. Basically, what this exaggerated sense of sexuality does is that it sets up a standard and a threshold for arousal that won't be matched in real life. Hence, it's like a simulacrum that basically influences your real life in such a way that you are having a false expectations when it comes to your private sex life. TikTok, like hyperreality of adult entertainment content, also increases the threshold for getting stimulated, and hence when you find yourself enamused by classical novels and books, you will quickly switch away, as the unconscious expectation to get overstimulated is already ingrained in your nervous system. Now, TikTok's negative impact isn't just restricted to your personal self-improvement. Rather, the emergence of TikTok will bring a whole host of political, social, and cultural consequences. So, for example, according to Marshall McLuhan, printing press brought forth a very specific type of humans, namely a typographic man. Now, this is basically a person of a bygone age. This was a person who was individualist, who had a private point of view, who could engage with written material, all sorts of things such as individualism, specialism, the ability of concentration, person who harbored all those properties. And of course, that was a consequence of the printing press and the culture of reading. On the other hand, according to McLuhan, TV, let's say, produced a completely different type of people. This were a culture of beatniks, again, who were occupied with self-exploration. Unlike the left hemisphere dominated typographic men, these were right hemisphere people of global attention, social cohesion, and self-exploration. Hence, the type of people that TikTok and short format videos will produce, or the type of philosophy that it will favor, will be radically different from previous techno archetypes. The three main principles that I want to associate with TikTok is cultural amnesia, suggestibility, and impulsivity. Through those properties, it will basically result in a form of intellectual disarmament, and that is the purpose of TikTok in this case. Intellectual disarmament then is a way one strips off someone with the cognitive faculties that is necessary to immunize oneself from propaganda. When the standard of believing or buying an idea drops to a 30-second bursting, energetic video with quick-witted wisdom, human brains become a fertile soil for insemination. Hence, the type of people that TikTok will favor are generalist, charismatic people who are not well read or have anything to do with books or written material, but who are just quick-witted and produce their ideas from what their bodies and instincts tell them. And that's why very specific cultural movements are becoming popular on short-format video content, such as Red Pill community, like, Andrew Tate and stuff. And that's very important when it comes to politics, because according to Marshall McLuhan, when Hitler rose to power, it was due to a radio. McLuhan thinks that Hitler would have never come to power if the primary mode of communication was, let's say, TV, because a radio, according to McLuhan, perfectly fitted Hitler's message to activate this tribalistic instinct by affecting the ear. And the important factor about it is that during During the rise of Hitler, radio was monopolized by people who were politically opposed to Adolf Hitler. But the point of McLuhan is that a medium has its effects and has its biases independent of who owns it. And that is what's happening in these left-wing dominated online platforms. Although YouTube and TikTok and short video formats is owned by people who are diametrically opposed to, let's say, Red Pill and Andrew Tate, it inherently favors them because they are the one who can produce this short, quick-witted, non-intellectual, highly charismatic, temperamental content. And that's the point. So there is a reason why you frequently encounter these wise statements accompanied with some motivational music with it. Basically what short video formats will do is that it will produce this culture of social wisdom. And social wisdom has its property of being very superficial and having no depth to it. And that's what will basically lead to, that will be one of the major contributing factors in the decline of the Western civilization. Now, this doesn't necessarily imply an apocalyptic scenario, although considering what is happening in France, it is clear that social media is a bestializing force that contributes to barbarism and barbarity, but it is definitely something that is noteworthy when it comes to understanding what forces are at hand in the cultural matrix. And what basically I described in my previous video is that there are two forces operating: the force of disinhibition, which nowadays has to do with TikTok, and the force of taming. And the force of taming, which is a civilizing force, has to do with reading books, which are nowadays obviously substituted by social media and internet. The cultural amnesia then, which is produced by TikTok, is one way people lose their cultural and national identity, because when you are no longer able to engage with the foundational texts that make up the DNA of your culture, you are no longer initiated into your cultural matrix, and hence you lose this connecting thread to your cultural heritage. Now, it's worth noting that according to Peter Sloterdijk in his essay Rules for the Human Park, disinhibiting media isn't something that is unique to a modern Western society. Every single culture had its disinhibiting force, which is necessary to provide bread and circuses to masses. So, for example, in ancient Rome, it was public hangings and gladiatorial fights, which is now substituted by TikTok and UFC fights and so on and so forth. But what's alarming here is that when disinhibiting force basically overpowers the taming and civilizing force, that's when a culture ushers into a zoistic condition. And a zoistic condition basically describes the most rudimentary and primitive form of life, which is only concerned with primary needs such as food, sex, and violent warfare. And hence it is not a coincidence that the three most popular types of content that you would encounter on TikTok is the content that basically tries to awaken your inner beast. This is the content of the satisfying videos where they cut up some food, content where they show candies and chocolate, things that has to do with this tasty junk food content. The second type of content is this fighting content where people are debating and destroying each other, or like physical violence when it comes to UFC, knockouts. And the third type of sexually provocative content. So to summarize my video, I would like to point out the basic principles that differentiate the modern people of shorts from the people of previous generation that were trained on written material. A typical person who reads newspapers, who is trained on perceiving words as opposed to pictures and sounds. Now, TikTok generally should be considered as a pinnacle of electronic technology, because what TikTok does is that it basically amplifies the very core properties of electronic technology. And according to Marshall McLuhan, such properties are simultaneity, instantaneity, and multi-sensory access. And that's what basically TikTok does. It's very instantaneous. You can that's why this form of multitasking is becoming very popular in modern day world, which is basically a scam. There's no such thing as multitasking if you're not doing a work that is extremely mechanical. In my opinion, what TikTok will basically do is that it will be one major force in putting an end to a high culture. Let me compare a techno archetype of a typographic man to a new techno archetype of a man of shorts, the Homo tiktokus. Here are the following traits that are associated with typographic men. The first is linear focus and continuous train of thought. Now, this mental faculty will basically go extinct as a result of continual disruption of your train of thought, as you are basically consuming a heterogeneous content. One video isn't connected to another video in any way. So basically, you are being, let's say, detrained from perceiving a continuous type of content that has its storyline and plot and structure, which is basically longer than 30 seconds. The second most important trait is long attention span and working memory, as one needs to hold the narrative in his head while reading a given material. Now, surely this is becoming atrophied and redundant, as videos that one watches on TikTok do not form a continuous narrative and hence are disconnected. Now, the third property is homogeneity. While reading a book, one needs to follow homogeneously arranged words that you perceive one at a time, and then you need to basically follow these linear sentences that are self-repeating. Of course, with as I have said, with the advent of electronic heterogeneity and discontinuity, this is a trait that you no longer need, and hence, with the emergence of this social wisdom type content that, let's say, Red Pill Society produces, you basically no longer need the property of linear logic and sequential reading. And that's why what mostly these charismatic types are saying is just a form of wisdom as opposed to a form of argumentation. And lastly, the one major component that is associated with typographic men is self-control and reward postponement. While reading a book, you would need to go through relatively boring parts to get to the crux of the narrative. This requires self-restraint and anticipation of future outcomes. As you might have guessed, TikTok specifically targets those faculties, as I have pointed out when talking about the study about how it hyperactivates the part of your default mode network that has to do with present mental state, but it deactivates the part that is responsible for generating goal-directed behavior and future planning. Now, in the end, I would like to quote Peter Sloterdijk. The phenomenon of humanism reminds us that human beings in high culture are constantly subjected simultaneously to two pressures, constraining and the unconstraining, or disinhibiting. It is part of the credo of humanism that human beings are creatures capable of suggestion, and that is therefore extremely important to expose them to the right kinds of influences. The label of humanism reminds us of the constant battle for humanity that reveals itself as a contest between bestializing and taming tendencies. Now, as the media theorist Marshall McLuhan pointed out, electronic technology basically produced an implosion, whereby the whole world was compressed into a one hot brimming tribal village, which then would accentuate impulsive and tribalistic behavior. Now, keep in mind that the techno archetype of previous generation, the typographic man, produced a high culture, which has to do with art, science, and humanities. And now the question is, what will the generation of TikTok produce? What is going to be a cultural achievement of people with executive dysfunction, short attention span, and perpetual ADHD? Don't forget to check out the special discount code for Third Paradigm viewers that you can find in the description. With my code TPD, you can get 56% discount on Magic Mind products.